This is the story of George. He went from making barely any money to now making around $5,000 in a single month with his own social media marketing business. You're going to learn exactly how George got his first clients, the strategy he now uses today to book clients for content creation, and also exactly how he closes deals. And he's also going to explain why he joined my program and why he thinks that was pivotal for him to get results. Let's hop into the interview. Let's start with how you found me. You just told me off camera and it's quite a funny story, so I think it's relevant to add it in here. How did you find me? What were your first thoughts? And then why did you decide to work with me?
I think a lot of people who get into SMMA, they probably come across people like Iman Gadzi, the only real name I can think of. But that definitely first introduced me to that world. And he had this like digital renaissance thing going on. You probably remember. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is such, how do you say, just a lot of noise and drama. And I was like, I get what he's trying to say. I get what he's trying to sell us on here. But there's all this unnecessary bullshit. And I don't think I can trust this guy. So I knew I wanted to get into SMMA, but I just didn't really know where to start. I'd quit my job in sales, only temporarily, but I'd quit my job in sales and I was quite desperate to get into something to start an SMMA or start a business. So I was just in the gym one day and I was like, how can I learn quickly about something? I can listen to a podcast. And I just typed in SMMA podcast and yours was one of the top ones that came up. Don't remember exactly what I typed in, but you came up and I thought, well, this seems legit. I'll listen to this for 10 minutes whilst I run on the treadmill. And yeah, that's where I started. The reason I trusted you was because you had so many interviews with your students, and all of them were wildly different. They weren't just like, yeah, I made 10K in the space of 3 months and, I was ready to go. It's all thanks to Adam. Yeah, well, big up Adam.
Yeah.
Half the time they would just tell it. 100% of the time they were just telling their stories and how they did it, and no secrets. Like, you can learn so much from just listening to Adam's podcast and his free content. Like, there's no secrets. It's all on the table. And I just started there, and I started right then. But I knew I wanted to get, the full thing, the full coaching. So I ended up buying your course when it was Black Friday, which is coming up again in about a month. So it's been nearly 1 year since I signed up.
And George, I wanted to highlight that point you mentioned, right? Which is literally just the fact that our student interviews are just real. Like, we're not trying to script it out. We're not trying to get somebody to say a certain thing to make us look good. As you mentioned, all the information is out there. Like, if you try hard enough, you will find through all my YouTube videos, put them all together, you'll probably find everything you need. And you can do this with all the other guys that teach this as well. The problem for most people is they just don't do it. Right? And that's why I think the whole coaching, mentoring industry has changed quite a lot. Like 4 or 5 years ago, you would have bought a course on something and there probably wasn't the option to pay for coaching or mentoring. Or if there was, nobody went for that. Whereas nowadays, that is the thing that gets people results. Like, courses are not so valuable anymore because information is everywhere. But if you have all the information, right, but you haven't got results, typically it's because of the fact that you're just not using it. And coaching is just a very easy way for us to bypass that. Because if you pay for coaching, where you get calls, check-ins, support, you'll probably use it. And there's also obviously other information that you're not going to get in a course that we're going to give you on a coaching call. So I think that's key, man. George, in terms of starting, what was the first step for you when you started? Because I think that for most people is the scary part. And most people watching this probably know a bit about this already, but like, what do they do? How do they start?
Exactly. Like you said, I don't even think in the coaching there's stuff that you can find elsewhere, but it's going to be so hard to find that. And what the coaching does is like tailors the information for you as a person. And for some people, that's so valuable. Especially for me, it was like, I've got all this information, but how the hell do I use it? Sending you and Ty, 100 DMs a week, just like, I've got this problem. Like, how do I deal with this? And then you give me the answer, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course that's the answer. But you needed that extra perspective. And for most people starting as an entrepreneur, you are completely alone unless you've got like a business partner. But you most of the time you are completely alone. There's no one that's going to understand what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. I have no one that I can turn to and be like, hey, how do I deal with this problem? So coaching is just perfect for that. It's just perfect for that. And how I started was, well, the first thing I did, I don't know if you still have this in the program, but the first thing I did was make a case study. Do you still have that in the program?
We do, but we've put a lot less emphasis on it. I think when you were in the program, George, that was probably one of the main strategies we pushed for beginners of how to get their first client was build a case study, not with your own results because you don't have any, but build it off of, find a fitness coach, show a fitness coach that grew 10K followers in 30 days, dissect and reverse engineer what he did, put that in a case study, and then use that. Not as this is my client, but as I know how to get results, I can do the inputs, I can do what this guy did, which might get you potentially the same results. We are actually not, we still have it in the program, we just don't push it as much because when we looked on a grander scheme over a full year of let's just take 100 random wins, right? 100 students with, hey, I've signed a client, hey, I got the 5K. Not that many came from the case study approach, even though that was the main method we pushed. So there was a discrepancy, right, between what we were pushing and what someone was actually using then to get results. So yeah, did you use it and did you get results, or did you use it and then pivot away?
I don't think I got my first client by sending them a case study, but it was super valuable. And if you want to just start right now and you don't know what else to do, I would recommend making a case study because it's less to get your client, it's more homework for you to figure out how this actually works. So you can feel confident when you do get on a sales call at saying, this is how we would go from A to B. So in that respect, it was super helpful, but I did spend probably a little bit too much time on it when I could have, saved 2 weeks or a month and just got started with outreach sooner. But it was good as homework. I don't think it's a complete waste of time. I think it's actually really, really helpful.
Interesting. Okay, man. And in terms of getting the first client, George, what did you do? Like, was it outreach?
I don't fucking know. It was the student approach. So messaged a lot of people basically just saying, hey, I've just finished university doing digital marketing. Have you got 15 minutes just to jump on a call with me and just tell me like what kind of issues you're having, what are the biggest issues you're having in the industry at the moment? And I probably was on like 10, 15 of those calls over a couple of months. And then this one guy, I don't know if I had just got better at it or if, he was in a place where he really needed it, but we had like 3 or 4 calls back and forth and just really liked each other, thought we could get on well together, work well together. And I ended up just, starting his social media, posting every single day. So it was quite a big one. That I remember when I started thinking, okay, great. I mean, I've sold him on this. I've got the money up front. Built a good relationship, but I've no fucking idea how to start. What's the first post going to be? And that was quite soon on. I realized that I needed some way of like working with the client to create content. So I started doing this podcast thing like we're doing right now. I just jumped on with my client and we spoke for an hour about like his interests, his expertise, what makes him a good person in his industry. And then I went and cut that up into reels and posted them like every other day along with graphics. But yeah, the podcast really came out of a place of necessity because I was like, what the hell else am I going to post?
I love that, man. I love that. For two reasons, George. Okay, right. Reason one, you got started without knowing everything. Like, you were happy to sign a client, take sales calls, get him on board, and then figure out, like, what the hell am I going to do? That alone is a nugget everybody listening to the video needs to re-listen to, because I totally get it. You want to have everything figured out. Like, you feel like you need to know what hashtags you're going to use, what scheduling platform you're going to use, everything. You don't, because the second that payment hits your account, you snap into gear. Like, you will figure it out. Trust me, because when the money is there and the client is like, hey, when are we starting? Yeah, you're going to figure it out.
Well, that's the second reason coaching really came in clutch as well, though, because I think I remember sending you a message, or the accountability group that we have, a message. I was just like, okay, I got my first client, now what? And then just getting inundated with like ideas and things you could try. And I was like, okay, great. You know, if nothing else, I can just go to my group or go to Adam and, you know, just figure it out from there.
I like that. And that's, you know, that's an undervalued part of it, man. Like you said, it's other people that will just tell you, this is what I'm doing. This is what I tried with the clients. You go and do it as well. But the podcast, the fact that that came out of necessity, George, is really interesting to me, because you've also used it to get clients. All right. So you've used it to create content for your clients, AKA serve them, but you've also used it to get them. You want to speak on that?
Yeah. I started by just the student approach and just asking loads of questions and letting them speak for so long. And I was like, if we were just recording this, we would have like half of the service done already. So instead of inviting people on to just talk as a student, I started just coming from like, I am a podcast. Do you want to come on the podcast? And then from there, you know, talking to them, getting to know them, really serving them a lot up front. And then at the end of the call, just being like, hey, have you ever thought about posting podcast clips like the ones we just recorded on your page? And if they said yeah, I'd be like, okay, cool, let's have another call next week. In the meantime, I'll get you a free video just put together. I'm going to put videos together anyway. You can see what I'm about, and we can just, you know, talk next week, see if we want to do anything else. And that was a great approach, but it does take a hell of a lot of investment on the front end.
Yeah.
And it's not something I'm doing anymore all the time. I'm doing it a little bit, maybe with like 5% of people, but it does require a lot of investment and value up front, which is a great thing, especially if you don't have much in the beginning and you just want to start and be busy and get to know people, get to know the industry you're working in. It is perfect for that, because I felt like I was never wasting any time. Talking to someone, this might go somewhere. If it doesn't, we're still making content. I was like, yeah, that's how I started.
Absolutely love it, because even today, George, I got a message from a guy to hop on his podcast, and it's not even released, right? So he's starting a podcast. This guy might never start a podcast. He might just be saying that, right, to get me on for exactly the way you've done it. But I'm still going to hop on, right? Because what if he does launch the podcast and it's wildly successful? Well, hey, I want to be on it. You know, why not? So it's such a genius strategy that I think is massively overlooked, George, because of the effort. Like you said, it takes effort. Like, you have to sit down, present yourself in that way of, hey, I have a podcast, and two, actually have the know-how to ask the right questions to keep them entertained for 30, 40 minutes. And I think a lot of people are just scared of that. So they probably won't do it, even though it's a very, very effective strategy, man. And so for you pivoting away from it, George, is that just a time issue, that it, like, return on time, it's not worth it based on how much you're making now? Or is there another reason?
I wouldn't rule out not going back to it at all, but I hated that people would go sour on me once I mentioned, hey, I do have this service, and then people would think the whole podcast was just about me trying to sell them this service, and I didn't know how to marry the two up in the best way. I mean, when it works, it's incredible. They're so happy, you're happy, you make great content. But when it doesn't work, there's just this sort of sour feeling you're left with. And I think the emotional dissonance was a bit much because I did it a lot. But I don't know. Even just one person going away from it being like, oh, that guy's an asshole, he just wasted my time, was like, oh, fuck, this ain't worth it. But maybe I was just doing something wrong. Anyway, what I'm doing now is just being completely upfront. It's quite a long message we send, but we just basically say exactly what it is. And I've got a lot of evidence to prove. I do a podcast, we make these videos. We basically just say, hey, I run this podcast service. I've helped X amount of clients get to X amount of, what do I say, impressions, views, likes. And I'm confident I could do the same for you. Would you like to learn more? That is literally all I'm saying. And then if they say yes, we just go from there. And that way they know exactly what they're getting into. We can even go and film a podcast. Like, I don't have any expectations of working with these people, even if they do just want to film a podcast. But they're very aware of what it is that I deliver before we get into filming and expectations and all this. No hurt feelings at all. You know what I'm about. I know what you're about. So yeah, that seems to be working quite well. It's only something I've started recently. But it's the complete difference of like a direct approach versus an indirect approach is like crystal clear.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense based on the issue you had, George, where, yeah, I get it. Like, someone, if they came on a 30-minute podcast and then thought, hey, this guy just tried to snake me, like he just tried to do this to get me to buy his service. Yeah, I can see how that would just be emotionally draining for you. And, after a couple of bad experiences with that, I think naturally your next podcast is not going to be as good because you're like, what if they get to the end and are also like, this guy's a douchebag? Like you said, the emotional baggage with that, I understand it. I have a funny story for you, George. I got messaged by a guy on Instagram. He is, I think, based in Miami. He has something like 10 million followers on Instagram, and I've heard his name a lot. I won't drop the name here. But he invited me on his podcast. Right? He's like, hey, bro, I'd love to have you on the podcast. Which dates suit you? And they mentioned that we have to film it in person in a certain hotel in Miami. Which dates suit you? And it was like January, February, whatever. And I knew there was going to be a pitch. Like, I knew there was no way this was just like he wanted me on the podcast. I was like, let me just see where this goes. And they send me a form, right? So they lock in this day, this time. Then they go, cool, so you got to be here in person. Like, yeah, cool, no problem. They then send me a form, Google form, fill that out. We'll then get everything set up and we'll look at the next steps. And I go to the form, and the last question on the form is, you agree to pay the $5,000 entrance fee or the $5,000 like show up fee. And I'm like, aha, so this guy is doing outreach to people, getting them so invested, like confirming a date, a time, location, and then hitting them with the, oh, by the way, you also got to wire me $5,000 and then we're good and we can do the podcast. So that's an example, on an extreme level of how you could use that strategy. In my opinion, not the best of ways, because when your intention isn't clear from the get-go, yeah, it's going to turn somebody off. So even though I was interested, just knowing that if he had just said up front, hey, it's $5,000, by the way, no problem, cool, it's $5,000, then I could make a logical decision, right? But it's that fact that you might feel tricked or snaked. Yeah, people don't like that, man.
Yeah. You can definitely make it work, though. I think if you're coming from a place of, say I was already making $20,000 a month, $10,000 a month, whatever, and I was doing the podcast in that way, and I wasn't coming from a place where, like, I really need this client, it would work better because, and also you'd literally have to really, really enjoy just doing the podcast. So it's like, hey, I have this podcast, you want to come on? chillest thing in the world. At the end, it's like, hey, if you want some support with your social media, I can help you out with that. If not, it's chill. I really don't care.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's how I started. And that's how I got the clients that I did get. But once you start grasping at anything, it does fall apart a little bit. And if, like I was doing nothing but these podcasts all day, every day, I was getting pretty burnt out with it and emotionally drained.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. That makes sense. And George, with your current service, do you want to just break that down? So what exactly is it, if I was to sign up with you today, how much would you charge me? And then what exactly would we do? Would it be strictly, would we do podcasts and then you do clips, or is it something different?
Mostly the only thing I sell at the moment is these podcast clips. With a couple of the clients, we're doing something like a little bit more like graphics designs, and we upload every single day, and social media management. But I've tried to streamline it. So we're looking at 15 podcast clips in a month. This is like the typical offer for 525 British pounds. So it's like $700, something like that. And that includes time on the podcast, the research I put in with like Google data, websites like Answer the Public, to make sure that we're tailoring the conversation in such a way that we're answering the questions everybody's asking. So of course, we're going to get views. We're just answering the questions that are on everybody's minds. But yeah, that's what it looks like. That's what I try and deliver for most people. And that's the offer we start on.
Nice, man. And I think the second question most people would have when they hear that is, does it have to be a physical podcast, or is it like we're doing today, where it's just two people on your Zoom and just run it that way?
Yes, always online, because most people I work with are like international. So yeah, it's always online. There's been a couple of people I've reached out to that are like geographically quite close. And for those people I've mentioned, like, hey, if we are working together for a while, you know, I'd be happy to have you in the podcast suite. But
yeah,
I wouldn't do that for like the first time. I don't think most people would want to travel the distance anyway. But yeah, it's always easier just to do it online.
Solid, man. George, do you think for a beginner that's trying to get into this space, do you think they need experience? Or do you think for a lot of people that's a limiting belief or just some excuse that will hold them back from starting?
No, I don't think you need any experience. You just need someone to guide you through it, or the gumption to go and find the answers. As people that I'm close to, people that I know want to start a business, but they never start, and they're just talking about it all the time, and they're like, this is what I'll do when I have this much money, or when I've got this saved up. And I'm the type of guy that just starts. That's what I've always done. I just start, even if I don't know the direction we're going to go in or exactly what steps I'm going to take next. As long as I know the first step I'm going to take, I'll do that. And that's gotten me pretty far so far. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend. Just the bare minimum and keep trotting along.
I love it, man. I love it. Very similar to me, George. There was a quote I heard sometime last year, and I think you'll find this funny. There's people half as smart as you making 10 times the money you're making. Simple reason that they're not smart enough to doubt themselves. Like, they are not smart enough. Like, IQ level is literally not high enough to not overthink it. And obviously, if you have a high IQ, you can still do that, right? It doesn't mean if you're gifted that you're fucked and you're just going to overthink everything. But think of how many people don't start because they overthink. Wild.
Everyone. This was how I learned to drive as quickly as I did. I decided I was going to learn to drive about 3 or 4 months ago. And I'd be driving and I'd see these idiots on the road, and idiots I've known in the past that have a license. And I'm like, if they have a license, why can't I get one? Why can't I get one? It was that mentality and that confidence that, you know, helped me pass. I just passed 3 days ago.
Nice.
Friday. So yeah, about 3 or 4 days ago. Yeah. But another thing just about that was because I do this SMMA full time, and I've been able to earn a little bit more than I would in a normal job. I was able to buy my first car, get insurance, do all these driving lessons, and that was a big win for me, was just buying my first car. It is totally beat up wreck. 26 years old, just as old as me. But I love it, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without, having a business and without the program. So appreciate that.
Love that, man. Love that. Yeah, George, you sent us that photo, and it was the Vauxhall, right?
Yeah.
And, I saw it straight away and I was like, that's the exact same. Like, my first car, it wasn't even mine, it was my parents'. This beat up old Suzuki, okay, not as old. It wasn't 26 years old, I'll say that. It was maybe 16 or 17 years old, but best cars to learn in, man. Best cars to learn in. You hit a curve, scratch up the wheel, who cares? All good.
Yeah.
No problem. If that was a Lamborghini, man, you wouldn't even drive the thing. You just need to sit there, look at it, You'd be scared to go out of it.
I don't know. I would treat it. If I owned it outright, I'd just be treating it just like I do the car I have now. Because I hate that of like, and I get it, but I hate that of like, having really nice things and then never using them because you're scared. Like, I've got this it's worth like $2,000, this camera I've got. And I use it pretty much just as a webcam now. And I've written my name on it, like engraved it in. It's got so many scratches on it from like taking it up mountains and filming short films and all this stuff. Nice. And these things were built to be used, so why not use them?
That's true, man. That's true. I bought a watch this year, and I remember I got a scratch on it like really fast, like in a week, and it was a big scratch. And I immediately, my monkey brain is like, "Oh no, this is so bad. You've got a scratch on the watch." And then I was like, "Yeah, well, if I'm gonna own it for 5 years, there's gonna be 10 more of these scratches. So who gives a shit? It is what it is." But on the business side, George, something that I think, again, we've touched on what holds most people back, right? It's they know what to do, they've seen the content, they just don't do anything. That is the problem 99% of people have. For the people that still think, okay, George has told me I don't need experience, but maybe there's some other little secret sauce he had. Maybe there's something he had. You mentioned, George, that you worked in sales.
Yeah.
Do you think that helped you? Do you think it just led you to a place where you had naturally more confidence because you had done some sales before?
Yeah, I think the confidence is the only thing that really transferred over, because I was selling broadband. And we had to sell it there and then on the spot. So it was like very kind of high pressure, make a decision right now. And if you try and do that with what we're selling, which is high ticket stuff, it's just not going to work. Like, you get on a call with someone the first time and you're just like, yeah, so just give me all your details. It's going to be £2,000 a month. You just wire me that money right now. Yeah, that's cool. And just keep them talking. Oh, yeah, nice plant you've got in the background there. They're just going to be like, fuck off. And that was exactly what it was like when I was, I did like a discovery call to join someone's course. I'm not going to say, but someone's course I was going to join, and they had like a sales rep that was very pushy, like full on. And I was like, man, I just want to ask a couple questions, and then, we'll see how it goes. But they were just like, you put the deposit down right now, or, we can't talk anymore. And I was like, okay, it's bullshit. So I knew that wouldn't work with what I was selling, because it was quite a similar thing. Yeah, but the confidence helped. But in terms of the product and the way you go about marketing and selling this to people, it's totally different to the job that I had.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. And if we do a little quick fire, George, all right, I'd love you to give me 3 things that you would have told yourself a year before you started. What are the 3 things you wish you knew?
The year before, so not 1 year ago, 2 years ago.
1 year ago is good. Literally just before you started, there was 3 things 3 mistakes, whatever, just 3 things you wish you knew.
Just maybe don't do what works, what works, I tried to do a lot of stuff in the beginning, like fancy outreach messages generated by ChatGPT, and it was kind of a waste of time because I was just like, I don't know, I was kept trying to make a new path when I could have just followed the path that was set out for me. So yeah, that would be one. You want 3?
I want 3, man.
3. Yeah. So take the advice. Number 2. More like more outreach, more calls, more podcasts, because I'm kind of guy that kind of is pretty happy just doing the bare minimum and just getting by, and it works. But you know, the only way you're going to get more results is if you put more in. You get out what you put in. So yeah, more. And don't give up so much control early on. I gave up a lot of the creative control to like social media managers and editors early on, and I hadn't had enough experience myself doing those things. So I think some of the stuff we were producing early on was not as good as it could have been. Like, it's definitely good to have help. I couldn't have done it without my team.
Yeah.
But early on, I just sort of got the client, got the team, and then I was like, I'm done. I'm going to go play Grand Theft Auto. Like, stay with it, stay focused, because you're going to get better results that way for everyone.
For sure, man. And I think, like you said with the case study, it's what you learn in that time that's the most important part. Like, your first 1 or 2 months with your first client, you're going to learn so fucking much in that time. Like, you're going to learn probably more than you're ever going to learn in that 1 to 2 month period in that time. It's your first time doing it. You're literally learning to walk, and it's a pretty invaluable experience. So for most people, that's what they do. Nearly everybody in our program goes and just does the service themselves. If they do hire somebody, it's typically an editor, a designer, or an assistant, someone that does maybe 60, 70, 80%, but not the full thing. So that you still, as you mentioned, have the creative control, the direction, the strategy, and that's super, super valuable. So George, just in terms of leaving people, well, second, we're going to get to where people can find you. That's massively important. Just before we do that, is there any last remarks you'd give to the person that's either started and just not seeing results, like no clients, they've done outreach, they're just really struggling, or the person that just hasn't started? Like, what's that one thing you wish you knew?
You could send 50 messages out and not get a response. And then you could send 5 and get a response from everyone. So you don't know what's around the corner. So you need to just keep going, keep trying. Like, and if you haven't started, you could be ridiculously lucky and send one message today, and that person could be like, hell yeah, this sounds amazing, let's talk. Mm-hmm. It's really that simple. Like, one message could change your life. So send one message, and then hell, send 50.
I love it, man. I love it. And George, where can people find you, man? Because you post content, you post some good content, so people need to know.
I'm trying to grow the personal brand a little bit more. So yeah, would appreciate that. If you guys want to find me on Instagram, it's buddyg__. And it's pretty much the same on YouTube, just buddyg, or originally it was gwizzy. So I think you can find it that way as well. So gwizzy, GWIZZZY.
No. Awesome. George, appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
So definitely check out George. We'll have the links in the description of this video. And if you are interested in working with me, like George did, and you'd like to benefit from the coaching calls we host, the one-to-one mentoring, and really just the community that we've built, you can book a free call via the link in the description. Have a call with us, see if we're a good fit, and yeah, we might see you on the inside.